Welcome to HVAC Full Blast, where you get industry inputs for real results. Today, we're unlocking HVAC financing secrets to supercharge your sales. Mary Carter from Trane and Stephen Ross from Sandler are with us, sharing can't-miss insights. Let's dive into the conversation.
How you been, Stephen?
Hey, in South Carolina, it's pretty hot, which is nice. I know some contractors are kind of sitting on the fence going, hey, I'm ready for summertime to get started. And it was a little late getting here this year, but it started. So
Yeah, I totally agree. We're finally, the sun turned on. It's been nice. It's been nice to get out of the clouds and rain, and now we're seeing some business pickup. So that's always exciting out there, seeing customers and doing what we do, just trying to get some inspiration going in the whole world of, better ways to do things.
yeah. Here's a topic which we've had it on the calendar, but here's one of the things I think makes it really, really relevant is that on the phone this week with a couple dealers, sometimes what happens is March, April, even February, you're relatively slow as a dealer. Your salespeople or your selling techs have a lot of time to spend with the customer. And so those sales processes are pretty thorough. We do a good job asking about all the things going on in the house. We talk about financing. We talk about tax credits, all that kind of stuff. And so our average ticket's pretty good. And even though we don't have a ton of leads, our closing ratio is pretty good. And then June hits and we're running twice as many calls and we're super busy and things are going really fast. And talked to a dealer this week. A sales guy ran 30 calls last week and only closed 6 of them. So on one hand, volume's up, like lots of calls coming in, opportunities, but because 30 calls, I mean, that's 6 a day for 5 days. So he's rocking and rolling. So his sales calls have gone from maybe an hour and 15 to maybe 30 minutes max. And so in asking questions in terms of, hey, what's your product mix like? He's quoting a lot of single stage because he didn't have the time to really explain what else is available. How many of those 6 were financed? 0. So
Whoa.
The sales rep he's not taking the time to talk financing because he's in a rush. And so, now in talking to the dealer, one of the things the dealer says, well, that's not a big deal because almost all of our customers just pay cash or like we finance very few, right? Like that's not our market. So I thought maybe we could just start with that and say, hey, Mary, you've been all over the country. You've talked to large markets, big cities, Los Angeles, New York, Houston, Chicago, right? But then you got the smaller markets like Des Moines, Iowa, and Columbia, South Carolina. And then you got like tiny markets, right? So what do you see? Like, are there markets, maybe that's a good starting point. Are there markets where everybody pays cash?
Yeah. Oh, great question. I feel like we see and talk about this all the time. And I think maybe I even asked you what the difference between finance and finance is at one time. Well, it's a joke amongst, finance professionals. And I have a finance degree or a finance degree. But we just say that the difference is the amount of money that you're talking about. Once you get up into that high bracket, you are financing.
Gotcha. All right.
So now we know. A little break the ice on financing and finance, but no, I mean it's so interesting, right? Because the perception around money and talking about money is a whole psychology thesis in and of itself. And what we know is that every individual has a money script. There is a script in their mind that has, instilled in them from their first transaction with money, like the first time you ever held cash or coins, can you imagine? But to now where maybe you're mostly digitally transacting with money, there is a script in your mind that says this is what I should do with it, this is what I shouldn't do with it, this is how I feel about it. And one thing that is consistent no matter what your script says is I don't want to talk about it out loud and I don't want to tell another person when I don't got it. So those are pretty consistent scripts. What's interesting about that is regardless of what you have, where you have, what you do with it, where you live, what we see is that when you're put into a emergency replacement situation or a situation where you really need the good or service being offered to you, money becomes the immediate reason not to do something and therefore causes the whole decision tree for the consumer to go down, really just a get it right, get it fixed, get it done situation. So it plays perfectly into this dealer that you're describing's hand, who's now he's cut on time and he's trying to make the sale as fast as possible. But then he misses that beautiful element of offering an affordable way for someone to pay for the jam that they're in, right? I'm calling you because I'm uncomfortable. I don't feel good. The house isn't working the way I want it to. I got people coming over. I got barbecue happening in 2 weeks, right? Like I got to have this house cooled, ready to go. And you didn't give me a way to pay for it. In fact, your stress is just elevated, right? So regardless of the market, regardless of where you live, we know that consumers want affordable ways to pay for the things that they want and they need. And when they don't get presented with one, they're not going to ask you for it, because we are not creatures who like to expose the fact that we don't got it.
Yeah.
That really is it, right? I mean, how many times, are you actively going to show your cards and say, I can't afford that, when you're talking with someone trying to sell you something? That's a pretty big pill for a lot of people to swallow.
Yeah. So I got a question for you. What was your money script coming into sales? Like, have you thought through, like, how did your parents raise you, or how did they talk about money?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked me this question. And no, you did not tee this up, and we did not talk about this beforehand. But this is where my mom, if she's listening to this, will just hopefully be sitting back, like beaming with pride. My parents instilled very money conscious values on me very early. They wanted me to understand, there's no such thing as a full paycheck. The difference between saving for your future and saving for a goal. And so my mom constructed an allowance system which required me to pay family taxes. And I contributed to a bank account, and we went to the bank and I did my, puny little deposits. And it was a whole exercise in, like, this is how money works for you. This is what happens when you save. You get that, that good feeling of earning interest. And I don't want to paint it like, allowance was a big deal. It was $10 and you had to hit all your jobs to get your allowance. And she paid it out to us as 1 5, and that 5 went right into the bank. You didn't really even see that 5. So you really got like $5. And then $1 went to family taxes. And then you really had $4. And then your $4, something had to go towards a goal, and then the rest you got to keep. So all said and done, I'm taking home like $2. But it was a really cool lesson to see, like, this is how you make money work for you, right? And family taxes, by the way, they didn't go to just random things. They went to very intentional things for the family, like Friday pizza night. We would take from taxes, and if we were, I don't know, we had a pool, and so if we were buying like new noodles for the pool or something, that would come out of family taxes. Like, taxes were meant to show where fun improvements and where good things could contribute to. Now, obviously, mom and dad are funding family taxes, right? My little dollar a week isn't going to make a huge dent, but yeah, that was really my money script. It was, I am always trying to find ways to make my money work for me. How am I going to be doing that in a capacity where I feel good about it? I know I can have fun, but I'm also, doing responsible things so that I'm not stressing.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember, it's interesting what you remember about your childhood, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so we didn't have a lot of money growing up. And my dad's super smart. He's got a PhD, but it's in philosophy. It turns out that doesn't pay that well. So we were kind of middle income, like maybe lower middle income. And our neighbor, though, had been going to law school for a while, gets out of law school, gets a job. He's a lawyer for a couple of years, and then he gets a big job, right? And so he comes home one day in a new car. And I remember, like, we were getting ready to go get in the car and go get pizza or something. And he pulls in a new car. We're like, oh, wow. And my dad started talking to him. And so we walk over there. We're looking at this car. We're like, man, this is kind of nice. And I think I was maybe 8, 9 years old. And I remember just going, hey, how much did that cost? And my mom was absolutely embarrassed. And so, I got a spanking when I got home, because you're not allowed to ask, what does the car cost, right? Like,
we're not talking about that.
And so, but that's like one of your money scripts is you learn pretty early on, like it's not, you shouldn't ask about money. It's not polite to ask about money. And we don't talk about money. I mean, that was just kind of, one of the unspoken things. We certainly don't talk about money with our neighbors, so.
Well, and like sort of tailing off of that, like in learning how to make money work for me, the also like the secretiveness of it, like, I'm very driven to do that, but we don't necessarily share our tactics. We don't talk about how we do that. It's just sort of like the mystery of, wow, like you have money and you must be good at managing it. Yeah. Yep. And there's nobody else behind me. Like,
Right. Right. Yeah.
And that's just not true. It really just isn't the case. And, along the lines with helping money work for me, sometimes that's financing, sometimes that is taking on a payment plan when, especially when I was really starting in my career and wanting to do more fun things and, pay rent and utilities, but then also like needed a car, all of a sudden that became a huge expense. And I really learned like what a 5-figure purchase means to me and my budget. And
Yeah.
and all of a sudden financing becomes really attractive. And there are ways to go about it and do it. But I think the one way to start doing it well is to talk about it. You just got to get a little comfortable saying, again, the financing word, the word that starts with F, a little bit more
Yes.
frequently in your sales pitch, because it's really the key to bridging that gap between, oh no, what am I going to do? Can I afford it? To, oh, what can I afford in my budget? And here's what I can say yes to.
Yeah. So let me go back to my question a couple minutes ago. I mean, you've seen the data from across the country. I mean, are there pockets where everybody pays cash?
I I could not honestly sit here and say yes. Los Angeles, cash capital of the
Right.
world, like they're crushing it. Without a doubt, and based on approval ratings from all different kinds of service companies that offer financing, you will always find a customer base that is willing to take on monthly payments. Now, what they take on monthly payments for might differ, but no, I mean there's not necessarily one market or one county out there that is just, you know, cash or nothing.
Yeah.
That's a utopia that I haven't found yet.
All right. So what if a contractor says to you though, hey, all my customers pay cash? Like what's the counter argument there?
Uh, uh, when someone says that to me, and I hear it often, I usually say, well, how did you offer for them to pay you? Did you only offer cash? And then you guys start to get exposed of, well, yeah, of course I did. And then you can have the conversation of, well, then of course they paid you cash. You only gave them one way to pay. How
Yeah.
how would they guess another way to pay? And you can start to kind of turn the light bulb on, oh, that's okay, good point. Maybe, how would you do it? And then I could say something like, a lot of our customers who are offering financing actually see higher tickets and more closes because they're giving their customer an affordable way to take on a monthly payment that fits their budget.
Yeah.
Boom. Simple as
Yeah.
that. But, customers are rarely going to say, wow, that's the cash price. Gosh, that just feels really uncomfortable to me. Could I sign up for a payment plan instead?
Yeah.
That's a big leap for a lot of customers to make.
It is. It is. I think it's helpful. I mean, you see maybe swings around the country where you'd say, well, maybe in this part of the country, 65% of the people finance and 35% are coming up with it on their own. And maybe somewhere else, 85% of people finance. But I've never seen even less than 50% in terms of residential home purchases, which could be roofing, siding, windows, plumbing, heating and air, right? I mean, any purchase like that, the vast majority of them are financed. And that's even if you said, well, let's count credit cards as self-financing. I mean, they're still, having to come up with that money somewhere else. And then you see statistics where most people don't have, $1,000 in their bank account or something like that. So, the need certainly when you look at the demographics is there for sure. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. And, it credit cards are financing.
Right.
We just gotta acknowledge that, and that's okay. And if you've ever met someone who says, "No, I'd rather just put it on a credit card and get my points," no problem. I love points too. Back to making my money work for me. Like there's no shame in using points and cashback rewards and whatever you want to do to make life happen for you. But it's
Yeah.
financing. And again, not saying that's a bad thing. That's totally okay. But a lot of people like to think that that's not financing, or I've even heard people say, "Oh, like, I racked up all this credit card debt." And, um, you know, the sad part about that is credit card limits are not necessarily money you have. That's not debt you have to go get. That's just a capability that you have to spend to be able to pay
Right.
back. But big misconceptions around really how credit cards function. It's just a form of financing. And yeah, some of
Yeah.
them come with some pretty great perks. Use them. Not saying don't do that. Just be intentional and be smart about the way you think about it.
So what's you've got territory managers and account managers all over the country, and they sit down with contractors. They say, "Hey, you should be financing. You're missing out on if all, especially if all of your customers are paying cash, you're missing out on this huge group of people that doesn't pay cash. So you should be offering it just to go get that segment of the marketplace." So if you're like, how do you do it? What's the official tagline? Like, what's the game plan?
Yeah, the weighted average cost of financing. Have you heard that one yet?
Yeah, there's a couple different names. All right, so weighted average. Help
Yep.
me understand that one.
Weighted average is definitely what you see is the most consistent recommendation to building in the cost of financing. Because again, maybe we could probably do a whole like myth section on what is financing, but to actually offer financing promotions, there is a cost to that, and that cost is usually given to the merchant or the business that is offering you that promotion. So even though I'm a consumer, I'm buying a new heating and air system, and I'm getting offered a 0% APR for 60 equal monthly payments promotion. Even though that's my financing, the dealer or the heating and air guy offering that to me is paying a fee to offer that, right? So what do we do with that fee? How do we address that fee? Um, Lots of uh, consumer credit regulation around this that says, I can't show the fee to a homeowner because that's a predatory practice or it's misleading. It basically the cut and dry on that is you can't penalize people for offering or for taking advantage of financing. That's a discriminatory practice. So you got to build it in. How do I do that? That gets me to the weighted average. So the weighted average basically says consider all of your payment methods, whether that be cash, check, credit card, or a financing promotion. Consider the percentage of your customers that pay with those methods, create an average, add it up, and that's the fee that you should be putting into every transaction all day, every day, so that you're just, set no matter how your customers choose to pay. Because on average, just using some ballpark numbers here, 30% will pay with cash, 30% will run a traditional credit card, and 40% will use one of your financing promotions that you show them in a proposal.
Yeah, nice. Can we argue? Can we fight about this?
I mean, I think I've laid it out pretty nicely there. I see no flaws. No.
Yeah. Well, here's when I was a sales guy, I'm like, hey, I want the biggest, baddest finance offer we have available because that's going to help me close deals. So I'm going back to the guy that owns the heating and air company. I'm like, man, give me a better offer. Like, come on, this, and of course the trade-off then is, okay, well, you want a better finance offer to help you close more deals. That's more expensive. So we've got to build that in. And so the challenge with the weighted average, and I would agree, like corporate America has proven that's the best way to go, right? If you're a big brand, a box store, and you're offering a promotion on TVs, that's how they're doing it.
Yeah.
I think the problem sometimes is like if you own a small heating and air company, right? Like you don't necessarily have the pockets or the cash flow that maybe big box stores have. And I think that's where the issue comes in. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I own a restaurant and I've got 100 customers a day, 5 days a week. And so I say, hey, I'm going to give I'm going to give free ice cream on Fridays, and I've got 100 customers. And so now I can absorb that cost based on, hey, I've got 500 customers a week total, but only 100 on Fridays, and I want to give free ice cream on Fridays. Well, what happens is some of your customers that come Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, now they show up on Friday. And so if you only budgeted for 100 free ice cream cones on Friday, but you have 150 people show up, like, oh, we miscalculated. We didn't plan correctly, right? So that like what we're counting on is we're counting on financing to shift behavior. But if we don't go back and watch the shift, we're not ready for it. And when I first owned a heating and air company, we had 12 employees. So how much time did I spend looking at my finance offer, my finance cost, and at the end of the month, how many people took advantage of it? I spent the right answer there is I spent zero amount of time looking at that. Like if my account manager came in quarterly and said, hey, let's take a look at this, I would take a look at it. But I also, because I didn't keep my eye on that on a regular basis, I was more comfortable just saying, hey, I'm going to offer different finance offers on different grades of equipment, but I'm going to specifically build that finance cost in on that line of equipment. And that way I don't have to monitor it. That was kind of my checks and balances. So I know that's not, as corporate America would say, hey, that's not the best way to do it, but it's better than not offering it at all. And if you're a small company, you're covering your rear end, assuming that you don't have the ability to monitor it on a regular basis. That's kind of the one pushback I give sometimes when I talk to somebody who's saying, hey, contractors should offer more financing is, but unless I also managed a kind of sales for a contractor. We had 12 in-home sales guys. I had 50 in-store lead generators at big box stores funneling leads in. I had an assistant who had an assistant. Just so we could say, hey, every week you got to look and see, how much do we finance? What was the average cost and so on? Let's keep track of that. And we had cash flow coming in. So, you got a big company, that is absolutely the way to do it. You got 12 employees, maybe not. I think that's maybe a little bit of my issue sometimes with how we talk to contractors and say you should offer financing.
Well, so many things I could say.
All right,
but first, maybe the most important thing is that my money script absolutely includes free ice cream on Friday. So I'm coming to your restaurant on Friday. But
that's good.
But that aside, so yes, that's like the first statement. Everything I think that you're saying here holds value and is true. And I guess the way to really kind of break it down is there's a lot of levels to this. For a manufacturer or for a financing company to come to you and, underhand pitch the weighted average method and, see if it gets a hit is really their way, I would say, of boiling the ocean on tactics and really choosing the one that we do see with big box retail. Any major merchant that you're interacting with today is using a weighted average. So is it the best method? It certainly is successful, but it might not be the best method for you. And I can get on board with that. I also don't hate what I like about how you said you were doing it is if that's perfectly fine. If on on a best, better, good, what the offer is going to be and you're pricing that offer for those tiers, great, because you're covered, right? You're not taking a gamble. You're still presenting an offer on every kind of system. Number one, you're not just saying, oh, I'm only offering financing on my good stuff and hopefully I'll get cash out of my low end stuff. And then your account manager is going to be coming to you saying like, hey, how come we never get any of these high end deals, right? It's like you're not equitably showing financing. So showing it on every kind of equipment, good. Building it into every tier of equipment with the right promotional rate, good. And if that's the way that you get to start, I say start. The last thing I would want someone to do is sit through a weighted average presentation, walk away saying like, well, that doesn't work for me, throw their hands up, do nothing, and go another season without presenting an affordable way to pay for heating and air systems. You got to start somewhere. And that's usually my best advice, when I'm working one-on-one with someone. If I'm giving a class, we're probably going to talk about the weighted average because it is effective and it does work. But I'm sensitive to the fact that it's time. It's definitely time. Now, I would say some of the platforms out there, some of different FSM platforms and CRM platforms have gotten pretty savvy in being able to show you, hey, this is how much you closed on credit cards and this is your average credit card fee, right? Because each of the major credit card companies charge a different rate. So if you can, it's worth the investment to be able to, I don't know, get that screen on your accounting system to just show you what those buckets look like and try to make it, a KPI that you can monitor a little bit because it is very telling. When I've sat with dealers one-on-one and just reviewed credit card processing slips, it's amazing for people to kind of have that moment to see like, wow, I didn't realize how many sales I'm doing on a credit card and how much of a credit card fee I'm eating, right? I think that's one thing just like homeowners think a new system costs $5,000, we think a credit card fee is 3%. Like that, there's just tried and trues out there that we all subscribe to. Crack into your credit card processing statement. Is it really 3%? How many Discover cards did you take? How many American Express cards did you take? Not to, throw those two companies under the bus by any means, but their fee structures are very different. And with the advent of rewards promos, all of those rewards cards usually come with an annual fee and a little bit of a change in a processing fee to a merchant. Anyway, going down a big rabbit hole on credit cards. If if you can't tell, I know a lot about this stuff.
Well, I think it's worth talking about. I mean, I since we mentioned Amex, let me point that one out. I think I've had a contractor before say, "Oh my gosh, look at the fee on Amex. I'm not going to accept Amex anymore." And the downside of that is, I have an Amex and I almost exclusively use it. I mean, everything from travel to running business expenses through it and so on. Because then when I travel for fun, I'm just cashing in points like crazy. So if I had two choices between buying a heating and air system from company one and company two doesn't take Amex, that probably sways my decision. I mean, just as me personally, and I think that's Amex's pitch is, hey, if this guy can afford the annual fee and he's going after these rewards, this is the kind of customer you want. It's worth the additional fee. And I would probably agree with that, both as a business owner and as a consumer. I would say, just like but to your point, you got to build it in. You can't just assume that credit card fees are going to be 3% or 2.25% or whatever they used to be. But yeah, you got to keep an eye on it. So for sure.
And I like your thinking there too. Am I the kind of consumer that's just not taking into account what kind of business I'm about to buy from? Probably not. That's why we encourage businesses to up their Google reviews and have strong online presences. And why wouldn't that also carry into the proposal and what I'm willing to look at and consider there? I think that's a really good point. I know you want to fight, but I think we're walking away so far.
Trying to mix it up a little bit. Hey, here's something that, every now and then you stumble across something and you think, well, that's not going to work. And then it works. And so for me, one of my aha moments was, obviously I am a sales coach now. That's what I do for a living. But at one point in time, I was a sales guy and I hired a sales coach. I mean, that's how I got into it. And my sales coach said, hey, when do you offer financing? Not do you offer financing? When do you offer financing? And so I just said, well, we get down to the end and I'm like, hey, this system's 10 grand and this one's 15, this one's 20. And by the way, we offer financing. He's like, what industries are great at offering finance? So like, who do you know? Like so the two that come to mind are like cars and real estate. I mean, most homes bought and sold are like somebody got a mortgage on it, right? Same thing with cars. And my sales coach said, when do they offer financing? And I'm like, I don't know. What do you mean? And like my realtor doesn't offer financing, but here's the key. A good realtor won't even show you houses until you've been pre-qualified for your mortgage, right? So the when on that in that industry is right at the beginning. And same thing with cars. A lot of times, if you're going to buy a car, they're going to try to find out, hey, what do you want your monthly payment to be? What do you think you can afford? What do you think you're going to qualify for? Because that's then going to determine what you're looking at, right? So my sales coach, who was not in the heating and air world at all, was like, I think you're waiting too long. You're waiting till the end. You need to be talking at the beginning. And I thought, that's just crazy talk. I mean, I would never apply for financing if I don't know what the heating and air system costs. Like, that doesn't make sense. And he's like, well, I hear what you're saying, but I think you should try it. And I remember going to this lady's home one time and knocking the door, and she's very nice. And we had a technician out there. So pretty high closing ratio type call, right? My service tech's already been there. He sent the lead to me. I'm now there. And the lady was just this little ball of stress. Like, you could tell her anxiety was through the roof. She's like scared. She's a little panicked. And like, I mean, to the point where I'm like, am I doing something wrong? I mean, I don't know what's going on here. And so we sit down at the kitchen table, and she says to me, this is an extreme example, right? But she says to me, she goes, hey, look, I have no idea how I'm going to afford this. She goes, my husband and I have had a savings account. We've had a savings account for a long, long time. And we just pulled like 15 grand out of the savings account and put a new roof on the house 6 months ago because we didn't think this was going to happen. We thought we had another 5 years coming out of this heating and air system. She goes, so I am completely unprepared. And so in the back of my mind, my sales coach going, well, you don't have to do the proposal, then offer financing first. And so I just said to her, hey, why don't we do a credit application? It takes 5 minutes. We'll just make up a number, we'll plug it in, but like, we can adjust it later. And she was like, okay. So we did that, and you could physically see the change in her, where she went from this ball of stress to, oh, okay. So I was like, hey, if you finance this amount, here's the monthly payment. You finance this amount, here's the monthly payment. Finance this. She goes, okay. So in that regard, I don't think she would have listened to anything I said about variable speed or indoor air quality or any sort of upsell until she knew she could afford it. So if I hadn't addressed that right at the beginning, that sales call would have gone nowhere in terms of my average ticket. I probably still would have closed it, but it would have been the lowest absolute possible option because she was so stressed. So it was interesting because after that, then I started building it into my process where 5 minutes in, I would mention financing. And if the customer said anything at all, right, it's kind of like throwing a little hook in the water and seeing if you get a nibble. If I got a nibble at all, if the customer said, well, what kind of financing offers do you have? Or are you running a promo? Or if they anything at all, I would say, that's a great question. Why don't we take 5 minutes, get you approved, and then we can see what that looks like. And you go, well, okay, out of 100 sales calls, how many people are actually going to say, yes, let's get pre-approved at the beginning? And it's not that many, right? Let's say it's 3, 4, 5 people out of 100. Well, if you could up your closing ratio 5% over the course of the year, would you do it? Absolutely, you would do it, right? So even if it's only 5 people out of 100 that say, yeah, let's get pre-approved for financing before the call even starts, you would do it. And so that was one of, I had a couple kind of, my first year being coached, my sales went up 20%. The next year being coached, my sales went up 20%. And then that third year, my sales jumped 40% on top of the other 2 years. And like, that was one of the keys was if people are stressed about money, talk about it up front, early, often, put them at ease, then talk about 2-stage or variable speed fans or inverter compressors or whatever you want to talk about. But if they're worried about money, they're not even going to listen to you until they know how they can afford it. And so that was kind of one of those eye-opening moments for me.
Yeah, and what I love about that homeowner story is it's not like she was sitting there saying, I have no money, right? She had just done a huge cash outlay for a different purchase. This is now an unexpected, unplanned event for her. Like you said, she was hoping to get another 5-ish years out of that system. Like, she's not reckless out here, just living her best life on a dime that's not hers. And again, I think there's some misconception with financing in that, that people who finance are just generally bad at money management. That is like, break that. If you're sitting here right now thinking that, break that. That's really not what financing allows people to do when they're in this situation that we often see, especially in heating and air, or really in home services, which is, I got to do this now. I mean, personally, we went through it recently with a foundation repair, totally unplanned. not at all what we
Right.
wanted to do with our funds and what we had going on. But and when you start getting those proposals back, it's like you said, I'm not hearing anything about all the new technology that there is and the layers that they can do and the graveling and this is why I use this pebble over that. Gone. I'm looking at five figures in front of me, like, okay, like
Yeah.
that is not what I wanted to do this week. Now, if you're a good homeowner and you're taking care of your property, you do it and you find a way. Why not make financing just a way for that customer to say, yes, I want to work with you? If I liked what you were saying to me, it just makes it that much easier.
One of the other things, Mary, that we try to coach contractors on and salespeople is kind of, strategy, like not just, doing the same thing on every sales call, but what kind of sales call is it and what's your strategy on this call? And that strategy varies a little bit, just like I'm a huge football fan. So, if one week you're playing a team that has a huge defensive line, you're like, we're probably throwing the ball this week. The
Mm-hmm.
next week you think we can run it down their throats. So you're tweaking your game plan a little bit, sales call to sales call. I think contractors, again, that's maybe a little bit more advanced selling. But one of the things you said is not everybody is sitting there just poorly managing their money, and that's why they need financing. So give me a couple different types of buyers that might take advantage of financing. Like, who do you think? I mean, if we created 3, 4, 5 groups, I mean, I don't know how many there are, but that's my question. How many groups of people or types of people do you think are out there looking for financing?
Yeah, I'm. It's probably an infinite number of kinds of people, just because we're all so different, right? But in general, I think some of the buckets where we miss is when we roll up to the house and we see the nice car and the nice facade, and maybe a couple kids are running around, and sometimes we hear about, oh well, there was a nanny in the house, and so I know they got it right. Like, oh, okay, big assumption there, but all right. I didn't want to be embarrassing or make them feel like they couldn't afford it, so I didn't offer financing, right? So any of those kinds of customers where you're walking up to the house with any kind of prejudgment of they've got money, and fill in the blank of what that looks like to you. Those are great examples of customers that consider financing. Sometimes those customers are extremely good at money management and they know how to make the bank's money work for them, right? So if I'm taking a 0% offer on a heating and air purchase, but I know I'm earning, a better percentage in a money market account, now my interest is paying for my monthly payment. It kind of like internally rob Peter, pay Paul, and all your needs are met. And by the way, you're earning interest, right? Brilliant, great money strategy, very savvy, and a great way to not have to do a huge cash outlay for a big purchase. One thing we saw a lot in the pandemic that was really interesting with business management was what happens when my business has to rely on my cash outlay, and the only thing that I have in the bank is my cash. And that's when we started to see businesses really start to get very conservative on cash outlay, because if that's the only working capital that I have to make payroll, I don't have anything else coming in. Now I have to be very judicious with how I spend that cash. And therefore, I don't want to let all of it go for every expense that comes in. I got to be strategic. And that's where you start to build in monthly payments. Anyway, same thing for homeowners, right? Why would I let all of the cash out of my savings go when I know maybe I can earn a little bit on that and spread it out evenly over affordable monthly payments? So, you know, the bucket of customers that you think, yeah, they got it. This is just only going to be offensive to them. I would never make that assumption. In fact, I would even say at the beginning of my sales pitch, by the way, a lot of our customers are taking advantage of our monthly finance promotion. If you're interested in that, I can talk to you about it at the end. Chances are that customer is going to say to you, no, I'm good. I'm not interested in financing. No problem. Just to let you know, you'll see it on the proposal, but let's take a look at the unit. What you got going on in here? Proceed, right?
Yeah.
How much do you think they think the unit's going to cost at that point?
Yeah. Yeah. Good. That's a good question too.
Right.
To make sure I understand what you're saying. So some people would say, because I had a guy kind of phrase it this way, he'd say, hey, I'm earning 12% on my money right now in the stock market. Therefore, if your offer is less than that, I would rather keep my money there and take your deal. So we offered him, I think 4.9 or 5.9 or something. He felt like it was a great deal because even though there's a little bit of interest there, he's out earning that elsewhere. And so even though he had the money, so that's kind of maybe one category. His phrase was OPM, other people's money.
Other people's money.
He liked it. He liked it. But then you said the other group of people, maybe they've got cash. And a lot of times I think of this maybe as a retired person. They've got a big nest egg, but they don't necessarily have cash coming in the door. And so that they could spend the money. But if you're forcing them to pay a check, and they could, they're going to shrink their buying power because they're going to get a little more conservative. If you said, hey, we can spread this out over a couple of years, maybe it makes them feel at ease. They'll open up the pocketbook a little bit more. So that would be maybe category number 2.
Yeah, and think about it too. That's what happened to your customer in your earlier example, right? She had just done a big cash outlay for another project,
right.
So she shrunk that potential, right? And now she's freaking out because, oh my gosh, I'm a homeowner and something's happening to my house again. Like that is, I think we probably don't ask this of customers a lot, going back to money scripts, right? But I think that's pretty common. I think especially in today's world, rear-ended on a Monday, HVAC goes out on a Tuesday, and on Wednesday, kid's broken a bone, and Thursday, another kid needs braces. Like, that's kind of how life can feel coming at you. Or, we always say things happen in threes, right? Yeah. How many times can you lay out a big cash expense 3 times? That's hard to do.
Yeah. I had, I've got 5 kids, and so I remember going and sitting down with a financial advisor probably 15 years ago. Her name was Joy, and I couldn't afford a whole lot in terms of like college savings accounts, like trying to put like little bits in there, and Joy just was kind of congratulating on me on putting anything at all in a college savings account, right? And the example she gave was she had a client that came to her. It was a husband and wife, both doctors, both made around $300,000 a year. Now, this is 15 years ago. So it's a lot of money today. It was a lot of money 15 years ago. And so combined household income, $600,000 a year, but everything they owned was on a monthly payment. And so they had their main house, they had a beach house, they had a mountain house. The beach house had a boat, the mountain house had ATVs, the main house had a pool. And so when you take out all the monthly payments on all those expenses, their disposable monthly income each month was $250.
Ooh, so well, I like the way they party, but that's kind of tough. Yeah.
So that was one. I mean, again, a lot of times I might stereotype them as that first group, which is, oh, he's got the money somewhere. He just wants a low interest rate, and then he could take advantage of other people's money, right? So that first category of guy, he might be the perfect kind of guy for maybe zero interest for 36 months, where the term isn't that long, but it gives him zero interest, and he could pay it off in 3 years, and he's got the money anyway. So that appeals to him. That would have been a terrible offer for the husband and wife who are both doctors, because that zero for 36 months is going to have a monthly payment of $600, $700, $800 a month, depending on the cost of the system. And so even though they present as wealthy people, and they are, they're really monthly payment buyers. And so you need a finance offer for them that gives them probably the lowest monthly payment. Now, they'll get a bonus at some point down the road, or they'll take their tax refund and pay it off. So for them, I would say something like 120 months, even though it might be 9.9 or a much higher interest rate, but it gives them the lowest possible interest or the lowest possible monthly payment. And then they're never going to keep it for 120 months. They're just using that monthly payment until they get a big check, and then they pay it off altogether. So, that's right. I think it was interesting for me to sit down and talk to a financial planner about what advice do you give to your clients, because she has all these different types of clients as well. So I guess my takeaway from that was, as a sales guy or as a dealer, I can't just pick one finance plan. I've got to have a strategy to say, hey, some customers are going to be monthly payment buyers, and I need a strategy to go get that customer. Some customers are going to be interest rate buyers. They have the money, but they're going to take advantage of the low interest rate. I want that. And then maybe I've got something in the middle, for that person that feels like they need to shop around, or they're considering using an Amex card or doing the finance or something like that. But, you probably need at least 2 or 3 different types of offers. So Mary, when you walk in and you say, hey, here's our finance partner, we have 87 different finance plans. Like, how do you help a dealer or a sales guy pick? I mean, what are you looking at?
Yeah, you're gonna have to like break out your like Monopoly monocle to read them all, right? Like it's gonna
Yeah.
be ridiculous. Um, this what's interesting about what you're saying here is eventually you do have to whittle it down, right? We don't want to be the Cheesecake Factory of proposals where we got to read a menu of 100 pages to decide how we're going to buy. But in general, and this is actually one part of the weighted average that really shines, when you price in the most expensive plan that you're going to offer. So say that it is that 0% APR for 36 months promotion. That plan is likely to cost more than any plan that tags on interest. So if let's say you have 0 for 36 in your menu, and then maybe you've got a 4.99 for 48 months, and then maybe a 9.99 for 120. Check out your rate sheet. That 4.99 for 48 and that 9.9 for 120 especially should be much cheaper in terms of a fee than your 0 for 36. So you price in the 0 for 36, you make that your tried and true. And then when the customer, and you're going over the payment option, sees that $600 a month, maybe they do mention to you, or maybe throughout your sales pitch that, wow, this might be a monthly payment customer. You always have these other promotions in your back pocket that then you can pivot to and still come out ahead because you've priced in the most expensive promotion. That's one thing about the weighted average that I actually really do like, because it just takes it kind of creates like worst case scenario, you're going to do 0 for 36. Best case scenario, you're going to sell the job with the promotion that works for the customer. Like that's not like the most eloquent way to say that, but it is one strategy that you can deploy pretty quickly without having to do one of those like, that's what you're interested? Let me run and get you a price. Disappear to the truck.
Right.
Oh, that's what you're interested? Totally understand. Let me get you a price. Disappear to the truck. You don't have to bait and switch when you're building in expensive promotions. However, that kind of can be like a level 2 to this. If you're still just trying to get comfortable with offering a monthly payment, just pick one. Just pick one and try it and stick with it. Make it part of your repertoire. Make it part of your offering, and then start to maybe actually it's probably a great conversation to have with your account manager. What are you seeing out there? What are other people doing? What's the market responding to? Everyone's got access to reports that can dig into that one a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I think one of the questions, I'm not an engineer, so sometimes if you start asking me engineering questions, I'm like, I don't know. So, but I did have a dealer one time. He's like, look, you got this variable speed 18-seer system, and you got the variable speed 20 system. Like, why do you have 2 systems that are so similar? And I was joking around, like, well, my response was, so I can have 2 different finance offers on them, because you don't know, right? And so you may have pick one and put your low interest rate finance offer, pick the other and put your low monthly payment finance offer, and see which one sells the best, right? Because they're going to be very similar from an engineering standpoint. I mean, they're both communicating, and so I don't know. So let's see what does the market respond with. So that was kind of interesting, was just to think, okay. You might think, I like what you said, which is if you're not doing any, then it doesn't matter. Just pick one and go with it. But you do have different buyers, and you got different buyers at different price points. So, in high school football, my high school football team, we were terrible. We had 4 audibles, run the ball one way, run the ball the other way, roll out, pass play one way, roll out, pass play the other way. That was it. 4 audibles. But like pro level football, they got some options in terms of what audibles. And so, I kind of think of that the same way. If you're pro level sales, and again, this is maybe getting back to that conversation. If you're a small shop and you can't manage it well, and just pick something to go with it. But pro level sales, you would probably have multiple offers on different lines of equipment that you could shovel the customer one way or the other, depending on what their response was on what sort of financing they're looking for. So
yeah,
it
I'm thinking about the Tom Brady Nintendo glove, like a book of plays, right? Like you want that in your arsenal to be able to know where to go. That's a great way to garner trust. That's a great way to create plans that, again, people not only, want to buy, but they can afford to buy. That's a great way to also, build yourself up within the community of like, this guy didn't just come in and used car sales me into some system. Like we really worked on a solution together, and we love when that happens, right? Nobody likes to feel like they got by a financing
Right.
offer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My account manager pushed me pretty hard to get on the bandwagon with financing and just look at it. I mean, to some extent, I wasn't even really looking. I was like, yeah, we got it in there, and yeah, the salespeople are offering it, and we were financing, probably 30% of our sales, but we probably could have had a higher closing ratio if we did a better job of offering it because we would have landed more customers. But what we finally settled on was we also wanted to have one for the service technicians. So if somebody's got to do a fairly expensive repair, that person probably is a monthly payment shopper. So, we would pick a 9.9% rate for them because it gives them the lowest possible monthly payment. But then we would have at least two or three that the sales guys had built into the equipment that they were offering so that they could steer the customer one way or the other, depending on what they felt like that customer needed. So it was interesting. I mean, we saw, just in the 2-year period when we switched our financing strategy, we went from 8 million to 10 million, and then not quite 10 million, 9.8. And then the next year we went from 9.8 to 11.8.
And those 200K chunks are getting you.
Yeah. I mean, I round up because I'm a sales guy, but in reality, if I was being specific, we went 8.3 to 9.8 and 9.8 to 11.8. But a lot of that growth was just getting a little bit better. Back to that guy that he ran 30 calls, he closed 6, and his average ticket was low because he's just selling single stage equipment. And so you go, okay, what was your average ticket? So let's say his average ticket's 10 grand. He would say, well, I sold 60,000 in a week. That's pretty good. And it is. Like, you're on pace to sell 250 that month. Great month, right? But you're giving up or you're losing out, the success of summer is that you left money on the table and you don't even know it because you go back, you're like, well, I had a pretty good week, and you're saying, well, what if out of those 30, you could have closed 8? And what if instead of an average ticket of 10 grand, your average ticket was 12 grand? And so that's 96,000 in a week. I mean, run that out for 4 weeks, you're at 380 or something like that, right? So you want to have a $250,000 a month or a $380,000 a month. And so it's just close a few more deals, get your average ticket up a little bit, help people buy something a little bit better. But man, the numbers get big when you run it out. Close a few more deals at a couple $1,000 more a pop, run that out for a month. I mean, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's what we saw. Let's just get good at it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in that. One thing that we see and we come up against a lot is, why do manufacturers put financing offers on their website? And then me, the business owner, I get stuck holding the bag trying to, if when I'm making my finance offers, if I didn't pick the one that's on the manufacturer's website, and then the customer says, well, I saw on the .com that they're doing 0% for 60. What happens if I didn't choose 0 for 60 in my, menu of promotions? Did you ever come up against that conversation out in the wild?
Yeah, I think it was, the one thing to remember is you can always go back and add it in, right? And so it wasn't ever that you couldn't do it. It usually was more of an issue of the customer picked a specific system, but then wanted a better finance offer. And as we talked about before, if you're not doing the weighted average, you're going, oh my gosh, that better finance offer is going to cost me $500 or $800 more, and I didn't have that built in. And so the one thing I would say to the dealer is you can say, well, Mr. Smith, Mrs. Smith, I quoted you this system with this finance offer. I can get you 0 for 60, but it's on this system over here. And that allows me to build that in and have it on a system. And if they really want 0 for 60, they're probably getting the 20-SEER variable, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean just because it's listed on the manufacturer's website, it doesn't apply to all systems across the board at every level. So you're able to say, hey, I've got that offering. It's just over here. It gives you something else to talk about and keeps you legal.
That's right. I mean, the manufacturers, right? they do say for participating dealers. So, if you're not a participating dealer of that promotion, that is okay. But what my challenge would be is if you're not a participating dealer of that promotion, why are you not a participating dealer of that promotion? Is it because you don't believe in it? It's not in your core. It's not in your menu, but you have other options. Okay, fine. Like, you're getting like partial credit from me on that one. But if you look at that and you just say, oh man, like, evil brand pouring, promotions down my throat that I don't really want. I really think you get a challenge of thinking on why they're putting that offer up there in the first place, because chances are it's returning some kind of lead or some kind of interest of somebody who says, "Oh, I can afford that. Yeah, let me look up somebody that I can bring into my home and get a quote on that." So, yeah, that's always my challenge as well. Is why do you think manufacturers put financing on the website? Because they
Yeah,
know it moves boxes. So.
absolutely. Absolutely.
I could talk to you about financing until the end of time, but maybe we should wrap it up with our hot take or our final thought on where this all lives.
I think my takeaway final thought is lots of ways to use the F word. Just pick one and the one that you like the most and go with that one.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah, I similarly I like that a lot. But just pick one. Do something. Don't be a sitting duck. Don't be out there not doing it. Financing is at its core a survival of the fittest tool, and the ones that are good at it all have a billboard in your town and are advertising it and crushing it on the daily. So
Yeah.
get on board. Do it. Awesome. Always fun
Sounds
talking to you,
good.
Stephen.